there. You on the table? I wonder if you'd mind taking a brief survey.
Hey, welcome to Screen Crush. I'm Arey, and let's talk about the ending of Severance. Spoilers are obviously ahead for what has been my favorite TV show of the year. So we're going to talk about the ending of the episode, every character's story in the finale, and at the end of the video, we're going to explain some of the show's bigger mysteries like Mark's wife, the goats, and what the heck Lumen actually does. And also, there were quite a few clues that Helly R wasn't Eagan all along.
What?
First, what I want to talk about though is what the show is about and its main overarching themes, because I won't be able to break down this ending if we don't have a mutual understanding of what the show is trying to say. Severance is about the demands that capitalism places on our everyday lives, specifically the capitalism practiced in corporate America. I mean, your job requires you to be kind of a different person. You might dress differently at work than you do at home. You're more careful with your words. You pretend to like certain movies just to get along with the people you work with.
Wait, does that mean you didn't like Roadhouse?
No, Doug, Roadhouse is awesome.
You're too stupid to have a good time.
But Severance's metaphor really hits home for us because it is kind of weird that we live mostly two different lives, and each corporation has some version of its own corporate propaganda. Like, look at this 1980s McDonald's training video.
The greatest gift is the smile you give to your brother.
Using a song to make employees feel a certain way about the company and about their jobs is the first step to indoctrinating them into a cult. In the same way that corporations like McDonald's or Disney revere their founders with paintings and statues, Severance has created a full-on religion for its workers. The Lumen employees even call the words of Keir the company manual.
Rise up from your deathbed and sally forth, more perfect for the struggle.
And it's easy to indoctrinate people into your cult when you wipe their minds. But this episode has some enormous reveals that this cult of Keir has been around longer than the practice of severance. But more on that in a bit. The actual workplace in the show is also a metaphor for the human mind. Think about the opening with Mark S. going down those endless corridors just to find his workplace. It's a metaphor for the lines in the brain. Just like Peter was trying to map out the workplace and his brain to better understand himself and his job. His map even says mind at the top. But mind has another meaning. It can also mean to watch over the place, to mind the store, or to keep watch over one another. So when we talk about Severance, remember that this is a show about people trying to understand their literal jobs, but also trying to understand their own minds, to understand who they are. And of course, they can never understand who they are because they're actually only half a person. And as we'll see, some people go to extreme lengths to have other people define who they are for them. For instance, Irving. He is the most devout member of the group.
It's the living soul of Lumen. And everything she stands for, not a bingo match.
Now, when we first step into his Audi's life, the camera shows it from the first-person point of view to give us the feeling that we're in someone else's body, which is actually how he must feel. Now, from contextual clues, we find out that his father served in the Navy in World War II, and that maybe he is a military man as well, judging by the medals in his home. On the surface level, this makes me wonder if maybe he suffered from PTSD, and that's why he chose to be severed. Last week, we saw that his Audi does not sleep. Now, at first, I thought this lack of sleep was causing his chip to glitch out, making his two selves bleed into one another. The Audi is painting the dark corridor where Miss Casey lives, more on that later, and Irving sees the black paint ooze out of his keyboard. So we're starting to see these two selves transferring traits into one another, like how his innie also loves artwork.
I actually cried when you guys put up the youthful convalescence of Keir.
No.
I did. I never thought I'd see the handbook passage depicted visually.
This actually makes sense because certain base functions and motor skills are shared by both identities, like language, the ability to speak, to read, and to drive a car. Although, since driving a car is a more complex skill, you can see that he has a little bit of trouble with it. Now, it might even be that Irving has one of the first Severance chips. Later on, Papa Eagan talks about bringing one home to Helena when she was really little.
I remember you said to me, "It's so pretty, Daddy. Everybody in the whole world should get one."
So maybe like 20, 25 years ago, the military were the first to use the chips to send people on covert missions or to better train soldiers to be soulless killing machines. He digs through his trunk, then removes the top layer. Now this is a metaphor for him digging deeper into his past. In effect, deeper into his own psyche. And what does he find there? Documents that show that he was trying to find other severed employees. Now, one of the people on this list is Petey, making me wonder if Irving's Audi is working with the group that unsevered Petey's mind. Maybe they first tried this process of unsevering with Irving, but it didn't go so well, causing his two identities to bleed into one another. It's also implied that he was already looking for Bert, so I think that maybe his Audi has some memory of Bert, or at least a feeling that this guy is important to him. Now, this would be good because it would mean that in the next season, his Audi would have something to say to Bert when he wakes up, besides, "Oh, sorry, why am I here at this house?" Also, I bet Irving talks completely differently when he's on the outside. Maybe he's a bowler.
Nobody with the Jesus.
Now, him driving off to see Bert might be frustrating at first because he should be going to go get help to tell people what Lumen is doing to them. But think about your first love. You would have driven off to find them too. The sci-fi version of I gotta go see about a girl. Next up, we have Helly's story, which I'm sure frustrated you. I just wanted her to tell people right away to do something, but instead, she and Mark S. both kind of wander around confused when their time is so limited. But that's just like the workplace, isn't it? At work, you're always fighting against the clock, trying to make quota. Time is strict and measured by a time clock. You punch in, you punch out. So it makes sense that their work selves would have limited time. Now, the big reveal this episode is that Helly R is actually Helena Eagan, heiress to Lumen. She took the job to become a propaganda tool for the company to spread Severance to the rest of the world. She became severed so high society people could see that it's okay and that she likes it.
But I took a severed job because it sounds freaking awesome.
So they have this art exhibit that looks like old school Apple ads of geniuses at work to show how pleasant the experience is. And there are also a few hints that, in hindsight, really should have made this obvious. Like when they take a tour of the Perpetuity Wing and Irving goes on and on about the first woman CEO. And she says,
"It almost makes me wish I remembered my own childhood."
and that's ironic because, for one thing, she'll likely become the second woman CEO of the company, and she probably actually knew this woman during her own childhood. Also, this reveal explains why Helly's Audi didn't just quit when her innie threatened to cut her fingers off.
And if you ever do anything to my fingers, know that I will keep you alive long enough to horribly regret that.
I mean, that would have scared the hell out of anyone else and would have made them run straight to the cops. And it explains why the board was so angry at Miss Cabell for covering up her attempted suicide.
Helly R attempted suicide 3 weeks ago.
Yes, she did.
How could you not tell us?
Also, these photos explain why Milchek was always taking pictures and trying to make her as happy as possible.
Say gratitude.
Gratitude.
And this line,
Maybe keep your eyes on the icy road.
the big clue that I will explain later. Helly's story is actually about how the upper classes use workplace structure to create divisions to separate themselves from the poor.
I am a person. You are not.
The best example of this is this woman who experienced her pregnancy while severed. This is a metaphor for people who become so wealthy that they pawn off their kids onto nannies and boarding schools. This woman even says,
"Couldn't have done it without a little help."
This is even more messed up because the mom still gets to physically bond with her baby without having to do any of the work. So instead of creating, say, classes of people in society, she is creating a higher and lower class within herself, essentially enslaving part of her brain to do the bidding of the other half. Just like how wealthy landowners in colonial times made laws forbidding African slaves to speak to the white debtor servants because they wanted the poor whites to feel like they were superior, and thus racism was born as a system of control.
Something only has value if something else has less value.
I was also wondering why Helly... Oh, actually, wait, that's her name because she's in hell. I just got that. So I wondered why Helly was so resistant to being there. It's because she was raised very privileged and she had always gotten whatever she wanted. But mostly it's because she never wanted the chip. She did it for her dad.
Thank you for going through with it. The grandfather would cherish what you've done.
Now, actually, how big of a twist would it be if her Audi actually hated Severance and was behind like that group that's trying to undo it? So then like her natural hatred of the process would have been transferred to her innie. Like maybe at this function she was already going to give the same speech that Helly R gave. It'd be a cool twist. By the way, this is a really cool visual effect, opening her face to reveal the woman inside, a way to show that we are about to meet the other personality that lives inside her brain. Now let's talk about Mark S. First, it was weird seeing Mark S in the real world, right? Adam Scott did a great job transferring that character into this other reality. See, throughout the show, lighting has been the key to the storytelling. Lumen is always brightly lit to show that this world is the only one that the innies know. But the outside world is usually at night and in the shadows. Characters are often framed with blackness on one side of the screen, and their faces are always in shadow. This is because the name Lumen also means light. Light is a metaphor for consciousness, as in, hey, are the lights still on in there? Remember how earlier I said that the hallways of Lumen are like the pathways of the brain? That's why certain corridors are lit darker and only illuminate when people walk through them. This is a metaphor for the subconscious, the darkest parts of our mind, where your consciousness can only be aware of one memory at a time. So Lumen's name, in a way, means light and consciousness. And as we learn in this episode, they want to replace everyone's consciousness with Kier.
They'll all be Kier's children.
So, what does this have to do with Mark S?
Well, look at it like this. Mark's brother-in-law has written this weird, terrible book.
But I think camaraderie is more than smiling together in photos. It's standing together in hard times.
It's all gibberish, but to Mark S, it is profound because he is a blank slate. I mean, on the outside, he was a history professor, but now he's basically an idiot. So this is all new information to him.
But waking up on that table, I was shapeless.
But then we see that some of the other people in the real world also revere Rickon in this terrible book. Like Rebecca, she only has half a name, like Mark only has half a mind. And Rickon's words even encourage her to change her identity again.
It was transformative. I'm gonna have to change my name again.
Just like Lumen has rebranded people with their new names. And the guy that finds the baby talks really weird and wants credit for finding her.
I found your child! I'm the one who found her!
So maybe the people in this universe just naturally gravitate toward cult-like thinking, because they're all lost and looking for answers. I mean, Rickon's book is about discovering your own identity.
All creatures, from the leaping cat to the cowering shrew, think of themselves as you, a logical center for the universe.
While Lumen is encouraging people to surrender their identities to Kier. The other big reveal of the episode for me is that the cult of Kier has been around way longer than Severance itself.
And one day, you will sit with me at my revolving.
I always thought they invented it just to control the people who were severed, but it turns out that it's just more underground. But now, they've found a way to make it a franchise and have it go mainstream.
Everybody in the whole world should get one. They'll all be Kier's children.
This is actually Lumen's end goal, for everyone in the world to worship their corporation without even knowing it.
Can you talk about Mark's wife already?
I'm getting to that. First, I want to explain some of the show's other big mysteries and offer up a few theories. For instance, what does Lumen actually do?
Even we don't know what we do.
Now, I have a theory about the numbers and Mark's wife that I'll go over in just a second. But first, for the record, I don't even know if the people who create the show know what Lumen does. And on one level, it doesn't matter what the company does. The point is that they're getting people to do their work by using emotions.
Each category of numbers presents in such an order as to elicit an emotional response in the refiner.
The same way that your job might get you to feel like super invested in a project that isn't yours. I mean, it is theirs, they own the company, and yet you feel like you have a stake in completing it for the good of Kier. I mean, for the good of like McDonald's or whoever you work for.
Got it 96% sorted, which means I've earned 4 of the 5 tier incentives, including the erasers and the finger traps that you see displayed here.
For instance, the goats. Now this person is heavily invested in the welfare of the goats, even though the goats don't belong to him. The goats are like any other work project. They're raised and nurtured by an individual before they go off and become the property of the company. And by the way, this is actually another Helly clue. If she always worked at Lumen, then maybe her Audi was the one who usually took the goats away, which is why the guy says,
"It isn't time, but get the hell out of here. Go!"
Or maybe the goats are used as some sort of sacrifice to Kier. After all, we did see Kier smiting down a goat-headed man in this painting. The artwork is also a very important way that Lumen manipulates people. It's used to control their subconscious.
Kier invites you to drink of his water.
Art always makes people feel a certain way, oftentimes in ways that we're not even aware of. Or sometimes art is used for more direct propaganda. For instance, the 2 paintings of the 2 departments killing one another are used to dehumanize each department.
I thought it might dissuade him from spending so much time with Bert G.
Both paintings are a lie, but they feel true.
It's proof. It is ironclad proof.
Milchek says it didn't happen. And why would one department physically attack another?
And they keep the working masses divided so they won't team up and unionize.
Why won't they tell us what we're doing here? What are they so afraid of?
Lumen used the photographs in Helena's exhibit in the same way, to portray a version of reality that people want to be true, which makes them easier to control. Now, another truly weird thing in the series was Dylan's waffle party, when he was lying on the bed of Kier and wearing Kier's face and watching people dance seductively for him, a scene that was foreshadowed by this painting. Now, this is the ultimate reward for a cultist, to feel like they get to be the cult leader. For a moment, he can see the world through the pleasure-filled lenses of Kier. Hey, just like we saw the world through Irving's point of view earlier in the episode. But now let's talk about Mark's wife, Gemma, aka Ms. Casey.
Yeah. Did she not die? Did they fake her death, like, to control Mark? Did she leave Mark and, like, fake her death? Is she a zombie? Person? Are zombies real?
Okay, so calm down. Here's my read on this. Gemma did die in the car accident, and Mark was driving. The people at Lumen knew this, especially Helena Eagan, because she would have been briefed on the lives of all her co-workers. So this weird line,
maybe keep your eyes on the icy road,
seems very specific, doesn't it? Not, hey, watch where you're going, or I'm walking here. She says,
maybe keep your eyes on the icy road.
Because she knew that Mark killed his wife driving on an icy road.
But she's not dead. She's in the show.
But she's kind of dead. Not every Lumen employee has an innie and an outie. Miss Casey is basically put into cold storage.
My life has been 107 hours long.
Just like Petey's map said, people live here. See, I think that Lumen has learned to reanimate the dead. They did this so they could find a way for the Eagan family to live forever, but they cannot reanimate their minds. So they just keep people in cold storage until they need them again. This could also be what Mark and his team are doing with the numbers.
So, Cat 1 numbers, for example, feel a certain way on sight. They'll be sort of disconcerting, scary.
What they're doing is selecting good and bad emotions. Perhaps in some way, they are crafting an emotional mind matrix for these dead bodies.
I'm to watch her for signs of sadness and verbally encourage her to forego further suicide attempts. Upon request, I can also perform a hug.
They could be working to resurrect Kier, and this would make sense because when they complete their quota, who comes to thank them? Kier.
In refining your macro data file, you have brought glory to this company and to me.
Now, I don't think that Lumen knew that Mark would, in his grief, take a job with them and get severed. So, Mark and Ms. Casey working together is just a coincidence. And this is why Miss Cobell is living next to Mark and getting close to his family.
You know it's good, right? That they don't remember each other. It means the chips work.
She is very interested in whether or not Severance can be reversed. The board says it's impossible, but she disagrees.
It's PD reintegrated.
The board's never acknowledged reintegration.
So she thinks that if Mark ever remembers his wife, then it's proof that the process can be reversed. It's why she keeps a close eye on him.
Does Mark ever think he sees her?
Now, as for Season 2 predictions, I'm going to leave that up to all of you down in the comments. Let me know your thoughts down below or at me on Twitter. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe and smash that bell. For Screen Crush, I'm Ryan Arey and praise Kier.